There are some evil people out there. The world is full of hypocrites and white supremacists. Money and power corrupts. You have the victims and you have the villains. Isn't that a negative interpretation for a so-called spiritual person? Shouldn't we be focusing on the better qualities of people? Why is there so much violence in the world? I mean, we have all this technology. We have the ability to talk to people and connect with people instantly around the globe. We've got more knowledge about history than any generation before us. And yet, every time we turn on the news, every time we scroll through social media, it looks like there's more hate, not less. And there seems to be more division than ever before, more brutality than ever before. There's another war that's unfolding. There's another mass shooting. There's another act of senseless violence. So why does this keep happening? And more importantly, as spiritual people, what can we do about it? Do we just sit back and witness it? Do we just keep sending love and light into the world and hope that that makes a difference? Do we just throw up our hands and say, well, that's just the world we live in. If it's meant to be peaceful, it'll be peaceful. Or are there actual tangible steps that we can take today? Are there practical actions that can make a real difference? From the ground level perspective, it seems pretty cut and dry. There's some bad actors out there. There's some evil people. Money and power corrupts. The world is full of hypocrites and white supremacists. You have the victims and you have the villains. There's the left and there's the right. That's all the ground level perspective. It's us against them. Black, white, good, bad, up, down, evil, righteous. But when we zoom out through our inner work, we start to notice a bigger pattern. We start to see that throughout history, this world that we live in is a lot of things. It's beautiful. It's abundant. The world is full of love and happiness and joy. And there are aspects of the world that, if we're being honest, are extremely violent. But Light, what do you mean the world is violent? Isn't that a negative interpretation for a so-called spiritual person? Shouldn't we be focusing on the better qualities of people as spiritually mature individuals? The answer to that is yes and yes. As spiritually mature people, we obviously want to focus on the higher qualities of every experience. And if we find ourselves being disappointed, if we find ourselves getting afraid and sad and angry by what we see around us, then that also means that we have an expectation that the world is supposed to be a certain way, and we keep getting disappointed and let down by that expectation. And so the spiritually mature way to sort of navigate this is we want to face head on whatever kind of world that we are living in. And by doing so, we put ourselves in a stronger position to navigate it and to negotiate the trickier contours of living life in this plane of existence. So let's openly recognize the fact that a part of the human experience is violence. In other words, we live in a violent world. We always have. And again, I don't mean that in a hopeless way. I mean that in a truthful way, in an honest way. Because if we don't acknowledge the violent aspect of life, then we're never going to be able to navigate it wisely. Imagine if you live in a place where there are landmines buried all around you and you try to pretend like there are no landmines. What's going to happen? You're going to end up blowing yourself up all over the place, as opposed to moving through that environment more mindfully with full awareness that every step is precious. And this contradicts the illusion that many of us carry, especially in the West, which is that peace is the natural state of things and that violence is this kind of Neanderthal response to demands and changes and pressures. And we imagine ourselves as humans to be morally superior over the other violent aspects of nature. We're more civilized, we're more democratic, we're more advanced than perhaps third world societies or even ancient societies or groups of people who seem to respond to things with violence. And when violence does break out, our reflex is to point outward and say, see, I told you, they are the aggressors. Those people are the problem. They are the ones who don't value life. But the reality is that violence is not some rare occurrence. It's not a glitch in the human condition. It is actually a part of the human condition. And if you look all throughout history, you'll see the same pattern repeat itself over and over and over. Wherever there's a group of people resisting power, whether it's an empire, a government, a ruling class, or something happening more locally, maybe even in your household, the response from the people in power is almost always some form of violence. It doesn't matter if we're talking about ancient Rome or colonial Europe or America or the Middle East today. It doesn't matter if it's a king on a throne or a politician in office or a parent in a home. When resistance grows strong enough, power almost always responds with brute force. And here's where it gets even more confusing. The perpetrators of violence almost never see themselves as perpetrators. They almost always tell the story that they are the victims. And they say stuff like, look, we had no choice. We had to defend ourselves. They forced our hand. And meanwhile, on the other side, the people on the receiving end of the violence are telling themselves the same story. We're innocent. We're the victims. We had no choice but to resist. So both sides feel justified. Both sides feel righteous. And that's why from the outside, violence can look so senseless and so chaotic. But again, if we zoom out, we start to see the thread. Violence doesn't just fall out the sky. It doesn't happen randomly. Violence begins the moment somebody does not feel seen and heard. It begins the moment that someone or some group feels that their needs or their dignity or their very existence doesn't matter or it's not being acknowledged. That's the seed of violence. And when that seed is ignored or when it's mocked or when it's suppressed, it grows into some form of resistance. And when resistance gets strong enough, those in power almost always respond violently. That is the cycle. It's not just cultural either, it's biological. If we look at our closest ancestors, the chimpanzees, they also live in hierarchies. And if a beta male ends up getting into it with an alpha and loses, he doesn't go back and try to retaliate against the alpha because that would be too dangerous. That would be too life-threatening. No, instead, he turns around and he takes his physical frustration out on the chimp just below him in the hierarchy. And then that chimp takes his frustration out on the chimp below him. And so the violence cascades down the hierarchy like a chain reaction. And if you look around, that's what's happening in our society. That same cascade plays out in governments. It plays out in companies, in schools, in households, and in so-called isolated events where somebody did something violent to another person. And so again, violence is not an interruption of human nature. It's baked into the system. It's a part of our nervous system. Think about the fight or flight reaction, right? Flight means run for your life. And fight doesn't mean fight until I make my point or fight until I'm acknowledged. It means fight to the death. That's why the stakes are that high in our nervous system. And that's why violence feels so extreme, because biologically it is extreme. So let's be honest. We are violent by nature. But of course, that's not the whole story, because unlike chimpanzees, we also have the ability to cooperate on a large scale and build and lead and to create and enforce laws. And so if we zoom out, we start to notice those patterns as well. And we can ask, what is a better way to navigate the tension besides fighting to the death? Is there a better way? The answer is yes. And so as spiritual leaders, we want to lean more into this idea of cooperation. Because here's the thing, from the ground level perspective, cooperation means I get everything I want and you get everything you want, which is obviously not always possible. But from that larger 30,000 foot view, nobody gets 100% of what they ultimately want. But is there a way for both parties to get enough dignity, enough sovereignty, enough respect to feel like their life matters? That's the core of cooperation. And from that core, which is also predicated on understanding, you have an antidote to violence. Now, I'm not talking about elimination because elimination is not possible, but minimization, softening, redirecting. And the fact that humans don't like nuance is really the big challenge. We like black or white solutions. We like all or nothing approaches. But again, that mindset is exactly what keeps the cycle of violence alive. And when we learn to approach life as, hey, neither one of us is going to get everything that we want, but both of us can get enough, that's when peace becomes possible. And here's something else we need to understand. Violence isn't always physical. It's not always bombs or bullets. Sometimes violence shows up as emotional abuse, gaslighting, manipulation, shaming, right? Sometimes it shows up as structural violence through laws, through policies, through systems that strip away dignity of other people. Sometimes it shows up in families as silence, neglect, ignoring, or withholding love. But it's all the same root. It's all different forms of violence. And it all comes back to the same seed. Someone, somewhere did not feel seen, heard, valued, and appreciated. Someone didn't feel like their life and their dignity and their needs mattered. So what do we do about that? Well, that's where spiritual leadership comes in. Because spiritual leadership is not about control. It's not about domination. It's not about silencing or punishing the other person. Spiritual leadership means going above and beyond to create a space where the people around you feel seen and heard. And that's all we're concerned with right now. We can't affect what's happening on the other side of the world right now, but what we can do is we can help the people that are in our immediate proximity to feel more seen and more heard. And if you're not doing that, then your spiritual leadership is in question. It doesn't matter how much power you hold. It doesn't matter how many followers you have. It doesn't matter how convincing your story sounds. The people within your proximity don't feel seen and heard, then your spiritual leadership is not as effective as you may think it is. It's kind of like what Mother Teresa said when somebody asked her, there's so much violence and chaos in the world. What's something that I can do right now to help? She said, go home and love your family. Start with your immediate proximity. And I'm not saying Mother Teresa was a perfect person either. There's some controversy against her, but the root of that solution transcends people. It transcends philosophies. It transcends religions and even spiritual traditions. Start by owning the experience that you do have direct impact and influence over, which is the people that are within your proximity. I guarantee you, every single person that you pass by today, every single person in your office, every single person in your house wants to feel seen, heard, and valued by you. I guarantee it. There's not one person who's thinking, I don't care if I feel seen today. Everyone wants to feel seen, including you, including me. 5 signs that your meditation practice is too complicated. Number 1, you rarely feel like doing it. Number 2, when you do sit to meditate, your mind feels like a fire hose full of random thoughts. Number 3, you're focusing on your breath or on something else. Number 4, your body gets antsy and you just want to lie down. And last but not least, you can't wait for the time to end and you feel relieved when it does. If any of these sound familiar, you're working way too hard in meditation. And here's the truth, most people are. But the good news is that the fix is embarrassingly simple, but you won't find it in a book or in an online course, not even my own. That's because learning how to master meditation is a lot like learning how to ride a bike or how to swim. Those activities are extremely simple to do, but impossible to learn without somebody teaching you the principles and then providing you with real-time feedback. And meditation is no different. That's why in the age of AI, I still teach live in-person meditation trainings. And if you're ready to master meditation, you're invited to Mexico City this fall to learn how to meditate with ease, the way meditation was always meant to be learned. Just go to mexico.beginmeditating.com or click the QR code to get all of the information about the early registration discount. And I hope to see you in Mexico City very soon. So the first thing we can do if we truly want to be a part of minimizing violence on the planet is we can stop asking who is to blame and why are they so bad and this, that, and the other. And we can start asking what led to this? Who wasn't feeling seen? Who wasn't feeling heard? Who wasn't feeling valued? Who didn't have dignity? The second thing we can do is we can work to humanize people. We can resist the temptation to flattening whole groups of people into one-dimensional villains. And even if you don't agree with their worldview, even if you hate their actions, you can still ask yourself, what unmet needs could be driving this behavior, could be driving this worldview? Again, not to excuse the violence, but to try and understand it, because understanding opens the door to compassion. And then the third thing we can do is we can help those people or people like those people feel seen, heard, valued, and dignified. We can step fully into our role as spiritual leaders, starting in our home and then in our community, in the workplace. And again, leading means creating spaces of dignity pretty much wherever you are. Because violence doesn't start in the headlines. It starts in the households. It starts in the workplaces. It starts in the conversations where someone feels invisible. And it ends the moment that person or that group of people starts to feel seen again and starts to feel like their voice truly matters. And I'll be honest, this is not easy work. It's not convenient. It's not immediate. It's not always popular. Yes, you're going to get criticized, sometimes by both sides. Martin Luther King was despised by a lot of Black people near the end of his life because he got involved in things like the Vietnam War and the Poor People's Campaign. And people said, you should stick to civil rights. That's your lane. If Martin Luther King could be hated, if Jesus could be hated, if Gandhi could be hated, then when you start to step up into your spiritual leadership, chances are not everybody's going to appreciate that effort. But that's what spiritual maturity looks like. That's what true leadership requires. Because the alternative is we keep doing the same thing and expect different results. We keep ourselves stuck individually and collectively in cycles of blame. I'm the innocent one, they're the guilty one. I'm the victim, they're the villain. And that mindset never solves anything. It only feeds the very cycle that led to the violence in the first place. So, to summarize, violence is not random. It's a part of the human condition. It begins when people stop feeling seen and heard, and it escalates until power responds with violence. And the story that's always told on both sides is that we are the victims. But there is a way forward, and that way forward is through cooperation, through understanding, through spiritual leadership. And that way helps to create spaces of dignity where the people around you right now can feel more acknowledged and more humanized. And that's what will interrupt the cycle. Not imposing your force and your power onto other people, not trying to control them, but on helping them feel seen, heard, valued, and appreciated. And that's the work of a spiritually mature person, which means if you're not working to that end, then your spiritual maturity is in question. So the way you know you are reaching maturity is because you are working to that end and you're not letting the opinions of the ground level perspective influence how you see another group of people. Instead, you're letting your heart guide this agenda. So if you enjoyed this perspective, if you found it helpful, I think you'll also like my episodes on the spiritual perspective on genocide. And then there's one called The Dark Side of Hustle Culture. And I also want to thank you for supporting the channel with your likes, with your shares, with your subscribes. Every bit of that helps to push the content up in the algorithm. So I truly, truly appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next Spiritual Perspective episode.